Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight, brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing, the earth-friendly publisher with books for both adults and children in a wide variety of genres, available in paperback and hardcover, as ebooks, and with some audiobooks as well. In the Spotlight is a wide-ranging weekly interview show with authors, entrepreneurs, professionals, and other experts. Your host is Cynthia McGregor. Opinions and views expressed by the guests or hosts on this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions and views of the creator, Crimson Cloak Radio, the network, the hosts, or sponsors. And now, here's Cynthia.
Thank you, Carly McCracken, and welcome everyone. My first guest this week is Marion Sharpe. Michael Sharpe, the author of several multicultural books, including The Last Drop of Sunshine, There's a Tiger in My House, and most recently, Poor Pepe, will release his first historical fiction novel in late September. That's titled Matsangu's Three Loves, 1619. Michael is also the founder of Acute by Design Publishing, a company of which his daughter is now the executive publisher. In Michael's free time, he monitors young teens and adults and enjoys playing the piano, playing racquetball, gardening, and cruising to warm climates. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, Cynthia. It's good to be here.
Good to have you. Michael wants to discuss Poor Pepe as a teen young adult short novel that is closely linked to the present-day issues of teen migration across the border without adult supervision, examined through the eyes of his character Pepe and Pepe's mother, Maria. Michael would also like to discuss what it takes to get published by Acute by Design, what type of stories or illustrations trigger the company's interests, and what's the process if someone wants to be published by A by D. What types of authors and books have they published, and what has been successful, and what does it mean when A by D says it is looking for multicultural books and illustrations. And Michael's books have been for all ages. His children's books, the books that I mentioned earlier, There's a Tiger in My House and The Last Drop of Sunshine, are picture books. Poor Pepe is a young adult, and Matsangu's Three Loves, 1619 is for adults. So
yeah, that could be young adult readers for in adults. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Michael, let's talk about Poor Pepe first. It has had some outstanding initial reviews. Tell our audience what the book is about.
Poor Pepe, poor Pepe. It's about. Before I tell you what it's about, Pepe was something that came about. I worked a couple of days a week. Shouldn't say I worked, but I was working with kids a couple of days a week in an urban school system in Massachusetts, and primarily elementary age kids. And most of them were from somewhere in South America or Puerto Rico. So it was a very large Latino, Hispanic population. And so I was getting a lot of stories and just watching the children, a lot of different attitudes. But one day I took them out for recess to play, and I decided they were going to play kickball. And so I explained the game because they're young, and I divided the teams up, and I put one team out in the field and one team up to kick. So the first little boy that came up, he kicked the ball. At that point, everyone on his team ran out to the field chasing the ball, and all of the players in the outfield started running towards the ball and kicking the ball. And I was like, what are you guys doing? This is kickball. This is not how you do it. And so the little boy stops and he says, that's how we play it. And I was going, no, you play kickball this way. And so we started to have this little man-to-boy argument about how you play the game. And so this little African-American girl, a little tiny girl, she's pulling at my sleeve, and she's going, Mister. And I go, what? She goes, just let's do it his way. We're losing recess time. And it just hit me that, so much of the argument in our country around immigration, migration, is just because we don't take the time to listen to the other person, to understand what's going on. And so somehow that just created the seed for Poor Pepe. And Poor Pepe is really a story about his mother who travels from Guatemala to the Mexican border and crosses over into the United States as an unaccompanied minor. And lots of very horrible things happen to her on this journey, which she's carried with her without telling anyone. And so she has a son, Pepe, which she raises by herself. And poor Pepe grows up in this very affluent community. And it's mostly a Hispanic Latino community and of Hispanics and Latinos who have become successful in the United States. But his mother is a housekeeper. So he's one of the poorer people in the town. And he's really bothered by that. And so he doesn't look anyone in the eyes. He doesn't want to make friends. He just feels like everyone is looking at him because he's poor. And so it sort of evolves of how his mother takes him through this journey of becoming aware of there are more important things in life. And so it really encompasses a lot of what's going on with the border, with immigration, with kids coming in alone, and some of the hardships that unfold from there. But it has a beautiful ending. I'll give that away.
Don't give the ending away. Just give away that it's beautiful, but don't give away what it is.
Oh, I couldn't. You had asked me to look through the book and see if there was a passage I wanted to read. And, the problem I had, the book hangs together so tightly that reading one passage was almost sort of not good enough because it sort of, every passage hangs on the other one. So that was a really difficult thing to do. But Poor Pepe's received really excellent reviews. It's actually now, I just found out today, being carried hard copy in the Barnes & Noble stores. And I was happy to see when I pulled up Barnes & Noble in Connecticut that it's on the shelves and it's available. So I was very, very happy about that. But anyway, it's just a wonderful story. I enjoyed writing it. I got great pleasure out of it. And I thought it was going to be my all-time favorite book. And then I started writing
Mansango.
Yeah, I started writing Mansango. And then that just took me over. And it's and now I think that's the all-time favorite book. And it will be until I write my next one. So there's sort of a rough accounting of what Poor Pepe is about.
Well, Mike, who do you feel should read Poor Pepe?
One of the reviews that came in on Poor Pepe said when I first started reading the book, I thought it was a great book for Hispanic Latino children who had there was a lot of inspiration in it. And he said, then I realized Poor Pepe could be anyone. He could be from any country. He could be from the United States because the emotions and the problems he was going through were very common to what happens to young kids when they get off on the wrong emotional track. And so I thought that was a beautiful way of saying it. So, but Poor Pepe, I almost feel like it's very important for middle school and high school kids to read a book like Poor Pepe because it takes them through understanding the value of wealth against a mother who is very principled and she works hard every day and she provides for her children, but she can't drive a fancy car and she doesn't have a big house, and that really bothers Pepe. And if I could use this moment to read just a small passage from it. I think you'll get an understanding of what I'm talking about. Is that okay?
That's fine.
All right. I got your permission?
You got my permission.
All right. So this is Pepe is sitting on the stoop of his house where he has to wait for his mother to come home on the bus from cleaning houses. And so Pepe sat on the brick stoop of his old red brick 6-family home. Looking left, he saw the immaculate mansions and pristine swimming pools of the affluent. Stately homes decorated the hillsides, giving proof to the slogan, America, the land of opportunity. It was little comfort to Pepe as he looked to the right from his stoop. He saw the mega-rich downtown called the Valley, exclusive boutiques surrounded by intricate iron fencing and formidable entrances that proclaimed Los ricos solamente, for the rich only. But beyond the super-rich stores were the town's elite schools, rated the best learning centers in all the state. Spit-polished yellow school buses proudly purred to a stop, pouring out their wealthy, well-appointed students. The little Fauntleroys congregated at the entrance, shiny new leather shoes, pressed gray pants, bright blue blazer, emblems stitched above their hearts, proclaimed their economic pedigree. But to drive from the wealthy hills or to the prosperous downtown, you had to pass Pepe's home. His old red brick 6-family building stood as the iconic gateway between these 2 points of wealth. Pepe named his home Casa de la Pobreza, the House of Poverty. So I read that passage so that the reader gets a sense of the contradiction that Pepe is dealing with. So he's surrounded by all this wealth, but right in the middle of it is his little poorhouse. And all of that sort of spills over to his school, to his social life, and so forth and so on. So
okay. Thank you.
That's just a taste of poor Pepe. But middle school kids, high school kids, and I think adults will really enjoy Poor Pepe. And in the test market we did prove that out. I sent out over 240 free electronic copies of Poor Pepe to readers, asking for them to comment. And many of those were adults, and they really enjoyed the book and got from it different things pertaining, depending on what their life has been like and what their experience has been. So it's a book for everyone.
It is. I loved it. I edited it. Full disclosure, I edited it, and I loved it.
You better.
What?
I said you better like it. But anyway,
Let's move on to the next book of yours that I edited, the about-to-be-released Matsangu's Three Loves, 1619. Tell my listeners what it's about. It sounds like a love story, but it's not exactly what the title sounds like. So clue my listeners in.
Well, it is a love story, but it is so much more. It's entitled Matsangu's Three Loves, 1619. So the 1619 comes about because that's the year. In fact, the other day, many African Americans in America, I shouldn't say celebrated, but paid honor to the fact that 1619 was 400 years ago when the first slave ship landed in the United States. They believe somewhere in Virginia. So that ship had about 20 Africans who had been captured on that ship. Matsangu's story takes place the same year, and it's based on a premise that following that ship was another slave ship that arrived in the Jamestown harbor of Virginia, but it carried almost 200 African Americans who, while in the harbor, they mutinied and basically killed the sailors and the captain on that ship, and they jumped into the water and waited to swim to the shore, and they snuck through Jamestown towards the Smoky Mountains. where they found refuge in a secret passageway into a valley where they created a kingdom, which was named after their African kingdom called Ndongo. And then that kingdom flourishes for hundreds of years, actually, undiscovered. So that's the backdrop on which the story starts. But there's these society called the 13 Angry Men, who are wealthy plantation owners, and they've made it their mission to find that kingdom and to destroy the Ndongo kingdom. So you have that happening. In the midst of that, Mansingo meets the girl from his village in Africa. She had been captured as well. And he had always been, as a little boy, that was his secret love. And so he grew to love her on the American shores. And so that was his first love. And then there was a princess, an African-American princess born on the shores of the United States. And that became his second love. And the mystery of the book is who his third love is. And I cannot tell you that because that would be what do they call that, a spoiler?
Yes.
Yeah, so, but all of these loves surround him as he tries to save the kingdom from attack. And there's one other piece in there. The Africans had made friends with the Indians in that area. I'm not going to tell that part because that's going to give away the whole story. But anyway, so it's basically a story that takes place in 1619 around a slave ship that has not been recorded in history, that was mutinied, and the Africans escaped into the mountains and created a community up in the mountains in Virginia. And it still exists according to some people. Do I need to tell any more, or is that enough?
I think that's enough. I don't know how many of my listeners remember the old commercial, "You don't have to be Jewish to love Levy's." It was a commercial for rye bread. Well, you don't have to be a person of color to love this book. I'm white and I love it. So
no, the test market we've done on this book has come back just incredible reviews from people from all walks of life. It's a great story. It's a love story, but it's also a story of the slave trade. It's a story of racism, hatred, and basically love conquering a lot of those things. So it's very interesting, and it goes back and forth from the 1619 period into the modern days, because the young lady who found the information to tell this story was a senior at Hampton University, and her name was Julianne Freeman. And when she was documenting some donated papers to the university, she found written reports about this secret African kingdom, and brought it to a professor, and then it unfolded from there. So it goes back and forth in terms and times of history. Very, very nice story.
Now, Michael, what's your next project? You're working on an epic children's book that's been in the making for almost 30 years. Is that correct?
Almost 30 years. Let's see, my daughter is 34, and I hope she's not younger than that, because she'll probably get me. But my daughter's 34, and I wrote it to begin that first story for her when she was around 4, and I used to read it to her, every night, and then I would make changes and I would make additions to it, and then as she got older, I would continue to change it and so forth and so on, and so the story kept growing and changing. And then she finally got too old for me to read to her. And so I had this story sitting there. And so I left it for a couple of years. And I went back and I started to try to write it to its conclusion. And it didn't work. And so I'd put it away. Then I'd pull it out a couple of years later, and I kept trying, and it wouldn't work. And that just kept going like that over decades. And what I finally realized was I couldn't get out of the fact that it was supposed to be a story originally for a 4-year-old girl, but now the story had evolved for someone that was older, much older. And I was conflicting the two periods of time, and I had to decide what was this story going to be about. And so I had to go back and actually recreate things which took out very important passages which involved my daughter. But I wasn't letting those go because they were very special to me, but they really weren't special to anyone else who might read the story. So once I was able to let those go and then write the story, it really turned into a really very, very beautiful story. And I gave it to her to read because she had to approve it because it was her story. And she loved the way it had grown and changed. So it took 30 years to get to the point of understanding how to present that to a reader so that it was a good story.
So it's a fairy tale for an older reader, an older audience than usually.
No, not really. Because I went back. It's actually for probably kids anywhere from 5 to 10.
Uh-huh. Well, that's what I had in.
That's what you had in mind? Okay, when you said older, I got scared. I think talking about older.
I mean, like 10 as opposed to 4,
Right. Exactly.
Now, you recently retired from your publisher position at Acute by Design.
It was a coup d'etat.
Well, Michelle, your daughter, took over as publisher.
Yes.
Is she taking the company in a new direction, and did you retire in order to write?
Yes. I was really excited a number of years ago with the idea of starting a publishing company, and it was a dream from way back when I was a kid, really, and I loved it. But I also have had a dream. I have all of these books that I've started or that are in my head that I've wanted to write, and I couldn't do both. So I had to make a decision, and I was just, fluxing around. What do I do? And then my daughter, I realized that she had just finished her master's or her MBA, and she's a skilled editor. She's a skilled business person. She understands all aspects of this business world. I said, well, who better to run the company than my daughter? And so she jumped in, and she actually used the company as part of her MBA thesis or dissertation, whatever they call it. And she's implemented a lot of changes we've grown. I would say probably since she's taken over, we've had about 100, if not 150% growth in terms of book sales and so where we concluded, but but I'm not going to go through it again. But I was just finishing up that my daughter is doing a wonderful job in growing the company, and it's allowing me to write, which is what I want to do.
Good. I want you to write too. I love your work, and I want to see you write a lot more of it. Talking about Acute by Design, and not to take anything away from the sponsor of this show, which is Crimson Cloak Publishing, but talking about Acute by Design, what is A by D's primary motivation as a publisher?
Right, and I'm glad you mentioned
Crimson.
Crimson, the sponsor of the show, because we have never considered them a rival or competition. It is an industry where small publishers like us have really flourished by being supportive of each other and helping each other in every way. It's an industry that there can never be too many of us in terms of the number of people that want to publish and do things. So I really respect the owner for allowing us to be on the show and things like that.
And
But anyway,
A by D has a mission that is different from Crimson Cloak. So
yeah, it is different. Part of our mission is we want to do books that have a multicultural emphasis or bend to it, and we also focus on trying to publish really quality authors who can't break into the bigger traditional publishing market. We are a traditional publisher in the sense of that we're not a vanity. We don't charge a fee. We pay a royalty for books, and we don't charge as ABD anyone for being published by us. We do the paying. We do the illustrations and the editing and the whole works. But we look for authors who they can't find a voice with the bigger publishing houses, and they also have a story to tell, which is supportive of multicultural issues. For example, if they're doing stories that embrace people from different cultures and different countries and different backgrounds, we really look for that. We look for simple things like, and I'm not talking about you have to be a person of color in order to publish with ABD. We have people from all walks of life, but what we look for are people, when they tell the story, they embrace the world or the community as it is, and it's not pictures of all white children on the beach or all white children doing something positive or being the heroes, but it incorporates Asian, African, Native Americans, just embracing the fact that we are a multicultural world. So we look for that in terms of a person's writing and where they're coming from.
Michael, we have about 1 minute left, and then I have to jump into a commercial. Tell our audience quickly how A by D accepts volunteers or interns if somebody is interested in being a volunteer or an intern at A by D.
Just contact us at acutebydesign at gmail.com. We have had a number of volunteers, interns, who have gone on to publish books, to become editors, to work for larger publishing houses. So it's not a dead end street. It's really a great internship where you get involved in all aspects of the publishing industry. And I recommend it for anyone who just has a few minutes and they want to do something: social media, editing, content, illustrations, reviews, the whole works. We're open, and we love to work with folks who want to do that.
And the website where people can buy your books and Acute by Design's other books is?
It's acutebydesign.com. And Acute by Design is all one word, Acute by Design, one word.com. And you can buy any of our books there. And Cynthia has several books on our website as well. So, yeah, take a look at our website and buy a book or two.
Or three. Okay, Michael, I got to let you go. I got to do a commercial and then bring on my next guest. So have a great afternoon.
All right, it was a pleasure.
Thank you for being here, and I'm signing you off now. Okay?
Peace out.
Okay. Remember, Acute by Design. Remember that In the Spotlight is brought to you by Crimson Cloak Radio, Crimson Cloak Publishing. Hello, I'm messing up. Crimson Cloak Publishing, which this week is spotlighting I Am Full Truth, I Am Half Truth, I Am All Lie by Ayesha Marfani. The story of three ordinary boys born to three unattractive and reclusive brothers. The three boys cherish each other's company and friendship and enjoy their life, though they miss the social hangouts and ordinary pleasures that other boys of their age are accustomed to. They have strong character, yet they have a troubling habit related to truth and lies. Only when their truth and lies cause misery in their lives and tear them apart do they understand how important it is to be master of the art of judicious truth. The story makes you understand the importance of being upright. Again, the author is Ayesha Marfani, and you can purchase it at Amazon.com/full-dp/b07dp/b08K. And although the author didn't supply me this information, I suspect you can find it on the Crimson Cloak website as well. And now I'm going to bring on my next guest, who is let me pronounce it right, Nkosi Ife, and I'm going to mess that up too. Nkosi Ife Bandele. Got it. Okay. Nkosi?
Yes, I am here.
Hi. I started to mess up your name when I was bringing you on, so let me say it again. Nkosi Ife Bandele, right?
You got it.
Good. And Nkosi tells stories. He writes for periodicals, stage, TV, and film. His latest novel is Scot Free, which chronicles the life of Scotty Snow, a New York City aspiring filmmaker who, via $99 Greyhound special, shoots for the stars in Hollywood, but lands down and out in San Francisco, literally on his knees, scrubbing the toilets at a vintage residence hotel. Hence the nickname Scotty Tissues. Scot Free is Nkosi's third novel with Crimson Cloak Publishing, following his debut novel, The Ape is Dead, in 2016, and his second novel, The Beast, in 2017. His short fiction, including his outrageous Fuckity Fuck Fuck Fuck, is published by Akashic Books. We won't get kicked off the air for that. We're allowed to use four-letter words. It's podcast, not broadcast. Scot Free is an on-the-road story about an aspiring filmmaker who's ironically stuck working the concession stand at a New York City movie theater and trying to negotiate his dead-end relationships, too. He hops a Greyhound $99 special, but en route to Hollywood lands down and out in San Francisco, where he becomes a professional toilet bowl cleaner. Scotty Tissues, by nickname, and realizes that his life west resembles his life east, and there's really no escaping oneself. Now, Nkosi, first of all, is this based on a true story?
Unfortunately, it is. I had hoped to escape New York many years ago, and I actually did. I caught a midnight $99 bus with the intention of going to L.A., but I was sort of rerouted and ended up in San Francisco. And to my surprise, they have residence hotels in San Francisco that are so old that the toilets are separate from the showers. And so my job at the residence hotel, in exchange for room and board, was to clean all of the toilet bowls each day. It was rather a humbling experience, you might say.
Yes, you might say. Is there a message that you want readers to grasp, and how much of it is realistic?
Well, yeah, I mean, my hope was that, I would sort of get away from, at the time, the dead-end work that I was doing in New York, but I realized that it wasn't so much about the work. It was more about accepting who I was and try to figure it out. So when I wrote the book, I was hoping to represent that through this character, Scotty Tissues, named after his toilet bowl cleaning.
And a lot is made of your specific writing style. How do you describe it?
Well, I really, try to write like a 21st century writer. So I'm very much aware of the way communications technologies affect us in the world today. So I try to make that relevant in the storytelling. And I also, really try to write an essential fiction, or I try to write the essential truth in fiction, which is to say, I try to really capture the human voice and try to catch all the colloquial phrases and really try to make my characters sound like people talk, more than a fiction that's so heavily crafted that you are always aware of the writer's techniques.
What books have most influenced your life?
Probably the book that's most influenced me is a German novel by the writer Günter Grass, titled The Ten Drum. It is I think it's a 700-word first-person narration, which has the ability to tell this story of this great individual character, but in some ways the history of a whole society and a culture. Really fascinating book. And I guess another actually series of books, which I found by surprise, Anais Nin's diaries. The way that she writes in such a effective, straightforward way, and writes with such sensibility about sexuality and sensuousness and all those things. Those are probably the most direct influences. I think of them, as a writer, but I do have, a variety of influences as well.
And if you could choose any writer as a mentor, who would you choose? Living or dead?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm gonna answer in a roundabout way. I would probably choose the late comedian Richard Pryor as a storyteller, because he was just such a great storyteller and so funny. And as a writer, probably Günter Grass, or maybe the, I guess now French writer Milan Kundera, who I styles I like a great deal, and they bring such wisdom to their writing as well.
What books are you reading now?
Ooh, I discovered this series of books by the English writer Rachel Cusk. It's her outline trilogy. The first one is Transit. The second one is Outline. And the third book, which I'm finishing right now, is titled Kudos. And she is so brilliant. She does fantastic things with dialogue. She can sort of blend dialogue into her prose style without using tags. And it's just so effortless. And she is so wise.
Are there any new authors who have grabbed your interest?
Well, Cusk is new to me, so I do like her a lot, although she's been around for a long time. I guess I'd have to give that some thought. Unfortunately, I feel like I'm about 10 years behind my reading, so I'm reading a lot of writers that I felt like I should have read years ago. I have been reading the French writer Michel Houellebecq as well, even though he's a bit controversial. Again, I think he does some interesting things with fiction.
And what about you? What are your new projects?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What about you? What are your new project?
Oh, yeah. So I think I am writing my magnus opus, the magnum opus. I feel like I finally really have a clear sense of what I want to do. So I'm writing a new novel based on the odd character from The Wizard of Oz, Professor Marvel, who is the actual Wizard of Oz. And I think it's a real interesting character because in the end, the wizard turns out to be a Kansas City con man. And I'm sort of interested in the con man and all of us in some ways.
And you want to tell us a little more about the book, or is it too
Scott
early?
Free or Professor Marvel?
Okay. Your website includes your blog, which is That N-Word's Crazy. What's the blog about?
Well, I just kind of, provide some observational humor of daily life. So I usually are just sort of talking about what I'm seeing. Sometimes I will post a specific story that I'm working on, but for the most part, as I move through the city of New York, it seems like every day there's some kind of outrageous event that I can sort of share with readers.
And the website is ES like in Sam, HU, B like in boy, AN like in Nancy, D like in dog, E like in Edward, L like in Larry, E like in Edward.com. Again, that's ESHUBANDELE.com. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, is that where people can buy your books?
Yeah, they can buy it if they go to my website. They'll click right onto Amazon there. The books are also available at Amazon directly, Barnes & Noble directly online. So anytime that you link to any of my profile pages, you'll be able to click right over to the book and to purchase it. Actually, all of my books are available now via Amazon.
And let's hear a sample of your writing. Read a passage, please, from one of your books.
Okay, so here's a passage from the latest book, Scott Free. And this passage is when my protagonist realizes that his friend, who happens to be a crack user, might have taken his $20. I started by speed walking and then high stepping into flat out mad dashing. I knew that my increasing anger was irrational. If you leave $20 and a crackhead in your room alone, ain't that inevitable your fault? I convinced myself that I could smell the coke cooking as I approached, and so I immediately pounded on his door. When he appeared with a huge welcoming grin spread across his Buddha face, I went completely off and threw everything I had into his gut. Just that quick, kapow! He shot back at me with a thick wad of pink, gooey, and chunky vomit, which caused me to react as if I'd actually been hit by a bullet. I dropped to the floor flat on my butt and felt my face and neck as if searching for a wound. I poured over his nasty inside stuck in between my fingers and looked at him as if he was one of those disgusting creatures from the Men in Black movies, or better yet, Star Wars Jabba the Hutt. After a few more breaths to recover, he plopped down next to me onto the floor. What you did that for? Flicking goo off the bridge of my nose, I turned to him. You really don't know why? No. My 20? He suddenly grew excited. You got a 20? No, fool, you smoked it up, my last 20. Oh, that. I thought you left it there for me. Coming back to my senses, relatively speaking, I figured conversation was pointless, so I resolved just to clean myself up. After I got to my feet, I pulled him up and intended to follow him into his room, but before I could take a step, I caught a reckless blow right across the jaw, which caused me to stumble a little. Now that dude stood there huffing and puffing with a horrified look on his face, one of those punk-ass dudes, a metrosexual, who never hit a man before and was thus shocked by the reality of it. Moreover, he noticed a sticky chunky on his hand and shook it as if it was a bug. He was scared of a bug. Like the crackhead had done to me, I went all crackheady on that dude. What you do that for? I told you to stop messing with him. He repeated himself 2 times, slobbering out the words. He was hysterical and fighting back tears. I was about to crack up laughing. I didn't want to say anything like I'm not messing with her because I thought it would make it seem like I was punking out and perhaps embolden him more and lead him to take another shot. And come on, dude had hit me with everything he had and I was fighting back the giggles. To avoid any further drama, I tossed him a bone. All right, man, I'll stop messing with her. I turned and looked at the crackhead who had a comical look on his face. Seeing him looking all funny and fat and crackheady, I just burst out laughing. That dude just stamped off. He left pouting. After he was out of view, the crackhead swept me off my feet with an enormous bear hug, and then switching from a cackling storybook witch, which he really was, to a game show host, he opened his door to present that dude's girlfriend. She was passed out and sleeping peacefully on his bed. Next to him was his crack pipe, all black and shit. That's the end.
Good. I got kind of a little grossed out by the vomit scene.
It's pretty gross.
It's real life. Hey, listen, tell us all. You've got an African name, but no accent. So where were you born?
So I was actually born in Philadelphia. Grew up in New York, but of course I have African ancestry.
Well, did you take the African name? Were you born John Doe and you took an African name later on, or were you actually...
You got it. Uh-huh. There's something like, yes. Uh-huh. It was actually given to me.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. But you had an American name in the beginning, and you took the Nkosi name later on.
Yes, a mentor gave it to me. Actually, a Yoruba priest. And it took me a while to grow into the name, but by the time I was an adult, I felt very comfortable with it.
So you were still a kid when you changed your
yes.
name? Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us more about yourself.
Well, like I said, I grew up in Philadelphia, but I spent the majority of my life in New York City. I've been writing, I suspect now, for 3 decades or so. I first started writing screenplays, and then I did some television, and I've been writing fiction for about 10 years now. And it's taken me about 10 years to really figure out what I want to do as a fiction writer. And I feel I can't wait to get to the next work because, I'm about maybe 1/3 of the way through, but I just think I'm sitting on a great story. And I feel so much in control of what I'm writing now. So it feels like all the hard work is paying off.
Good. Got any funny stories or heartwarming stories that you can share with us?
Well, I'll tell my inspirational story for young writers. When I first started writing, the first, serious work that I undertook was a screenplay. And I wrote it. I had no real experience in screenwriting, but I had this notion that whatever I had written was worthy of being made into a movie. So I found the names of 25 Hollywood agents. This is all prior to the internet, so this is all snail mail. Packed the scripts away, sent them off, and since I was really young, I just sort of forgot about it. I would say about 6 months later, I get a phone call, and of course this is before cell phones, so it's on my landline. I pick up the phone, and the person on the other line, she asked me if it was me, and I said yes. And she said, well, stop showing your work around. When she said that, I panicked. I thought, oh my goodness, my work is so terrible that readers are calling me and telling me to stop showing it. She could hear the distress in my voice, So she started laughing, and she said, no, I'm telling you not to show your work around anymore, because now that's my job. I would like to be your agent. And I was shocked. I had no real thought that that would happen. And so in some ways, very oddly, the first time out turned out to be a relative success. And I wish I could, say that it was always a success, but it was just marvelous. And I like to, again, tell young writers about that, because I think sometimes people think that you have to know someone and you have to do this. And that may be true, but I think you have to write well.
Yeah.
So if you focus on the project and you write well, then, you take your chances like everybody else.
And was that screenplay ultimately produced?
Well, then the heartbreak begins. It went into development, and, Hollywood is such an awful place. As a screenwriter, you really don't make money until the principal shooting begins. So the film was in development. It had a high-profile star attached to it. And I'm probably embellishing a little bit, but she pulled out of the project like the day before we were going into principal shooting, the day that I would have been paid for it. And so, no, the film was never made. That's one of the reasons I left Hollywood, in part because so much of your work gets sort of warehoused rather than made. So you can make some money, but it's just very hard to get a film made because they're so expensive. Ironically, after all this time, because I left that business probably now 20 years ago, over the summer, I wrote another script for a small company based in New York called South Street Pictures. And, fingers crossed, we're hoping that they will make it into a film.
Well, from your mouth to God's ear, let's hope.
You got it.
Got anything else you want to share with us? We've got about 6 minutes left.
Trying to think. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about, writing in the 21st century. And, for the first time, I'm teaching an intro to fiction writing course at the New School University where I teach. And so I'm really trying to consider how to talk to young writers about, writing today where we live in a world, in part because of our communications technologies, where everything feels so fragmented. We take in so much information, and we're so much more aware of the world around us in some ways. I think our characters change, their voices change. And so that's becoming the real challenge for me as a writer, not to mention just with so much going on in the country right now, to maintain focus and to create quiet spaces that I can enter on a daily basis. Right now, I can't remember a time where the country was any more noisy than it is right now. Just so much going on here.
Do you write primarily about people of color, or do you write just about anyone?
Well, just about anyone. My protagonist, is a young, African-American man, but the world in which he lives is, as everyone is there. So I have, as a fiction writer, restricted myself up to this point to writing first-person narration. Some of that is I'm still not quite comfortable presuming the psychologies at the level of fiction writing of so many people. But no, actually the screenplay I wrote was a romantic comedy that I originally wrote, not to drop any names, with the hopes that Julia Roberts would be in it. But the actor who attached herself to it was Minnie Driver. So no, I'm open to really, I just go where the story is, where I feel like I have a good story. I try to really think through the character and create the circumstances and tell stories. In the end, I think that readers will benefit from just reading good stories that say something about the human condition, And again, I think at a time right now where just kind of knowing about the self is really important.
In the 3 minutes we have left, can you tell us, because the title intrigues me, so I'm curious as hell, what The Ape is Dead is about?
Well, the title, that title has become a trivia question for my students. I always ask them, where did I get that from? And because in the spring semester, I usually teach a course in romantic love. But so the phrase is actually from Romeo and Juliet.
Oh.
So when Romeo falls for Juliet, his best friend Mercutio, who doesn't approve of him falling in love, accuses him of losing the animal self, because for Mercutio, love was for these sort of, fancy guys who like to use a lot of pretty words. So when he was berating Romeo, he said, he lamented, the ape is dead, which is to say that his animal self was dead, and now he was one of these fancy guys who was talking about love all the time. So when I was thinking about the theme of the novel, I thought that my protagonist's problem was that he was so busy trying to do the right thing, he was forgetting all about the animal self. So, as a sort of an insider joke, I was saying the ape is dead, but, a lot of that just had to do with the idea that instead of just responding to his instincts, he was trying to do what everyone was telling him to do.
Well, my guest has been Nkosi Bandele. Did I get it right that time?
You got it right the first time, too. Thank you.
Oh, but I started to mess up before you came on the show. I caught myself and got it right, but I had to catch myself. Nkosi, thank you for being our guest, and good luck with your books and with all that you're working on.
Thank you for having me, Sin. I really appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. Take care.
Bye-bye now.
Okay. Remember, folks, that Crimson Cloak Publishing is the sponsor of In the Spotlight, and they are publishers of fiction and nonfiction for children and for adults. You can find just about anything except erotic romance on their website, which is crimsoncloakpublishing.com. So tune in next week at the same time as always, and don't forget to pass a smile along. This is Cynthia McGregor saying bye now.
You have been listening to In the Spotlight with your host, Cynthia McGregor, brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing. For a wide variety of books for both adults and children in print, ebook, and audio formats, join us every Tuesday at the same time as In the Spotlight brings you interesting guests to entertain and enlighten you. I'm Carly McCracken. On behalf of Crimson Cloak Publishing, thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next week.